Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at attention in the pristine white halls of the Galactic Defense Council headquarters. Her uniform was perfect, her medals gleaming, and her reputation spotless. For 3 years, she had been the poster child of human integration into the galactic community. The media loved her story, a small-town farm girl from Earth who became the first human to receive the Medal of Galactic Honor. The other species in the galaxy had watched humans with curiosity and mild concern when Earth joined the Council 5 years ago. Humans were young, unpredictable, and seemed to have an unusual relationship with violence. Most species had evolved past physical conflict millennia ago, resolving disputes through meditation, negotiation, or simple biological incompatibility that made war impossible. But Sarah Chen changed everything. During the Proxima Station incident, when Zeltharian pirates attacked the civilian outpost, she had single-handedly saved 2,000 lives. The official reports painted her as a model soldier, disciplined, compassionate, and restrained. She had somehow convinced the pirates to surrender without firing a single shot. The galaxy celebrated her as proof that humans could evolve beyond their violent nature. Today, however, something was different. Admiral Corinth, a tall Zeltharian with silver skin and 4 arms, paced nervously behind his desk. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of anxiety that Sarah had never seen before. Beside him stood Commander Vex, a crystalline being from the Axiom Collective whose thoughts usually flowed in perfect mathematical patterns. "Lieutenant Chen," Admiral Corinth began, his voice carrying the formal tone reserved for serious matters. "We need to discuss the Proxima Station incident." Sarah's heart rate stayed steady. She had reviewed that mission countless times for interviews, documentaries, and training seminars. Every detail was burned into her memory. "Of course, sir. What specifically would you like to know?" Commander Vex stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting the room's light into rainbow patterns. "We have received some disturbing information, evidence that suggests the official reports may not tell the complete story." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the space station's life support systems. Sarah maintained her composed expression, though she felt a familiar knot forming in her stomach. It was the same feeling she had gotten on Proxima Station when she realized the situation was far worse than anyone knew. "Evidence, sir?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice level. Admiral Corinth activated a holographic display above his desk. The blue light showed the layout of Proxima Station, a mining facility built into a large asteroid, with residential areas, mining operations, and a small defense grid. This came from a maintenance drone that was performing repairs in the outer hull during the incident. The drone's memory core was damaged and only recently recovered. The hologram shifted to show grainy footage from the drone's perspective. Sarah watched herself moving through the station's corridors, but something was wrong with the timeline. According to the official reports, she had spent 6 hours negotiating with the pirates. The timestamp on the drone footage showed the entire incident lasting only 47 minutes. "There appears to be a significant discrepancy in the timeline," Commander Vex observed, his voice carrying the neutral tone his species used when processing unexpected data. "The official reports state that you spent hours in careful negotiation, gradually building trust with the pirate leader and convincing him that surrender was in everyone's best interest." Sarah nodded slowly. That was indeed what the report said. It was a story that had made her famous across the galaxy as an example of human diplomatic evolution. Admiral Corinth zoomed in on a specific section of the footage. "This shows you entering the Pirates' command center at 14:23 station time. The next clear footage we have is at 14:47, showing the pirates voluntarily walking to the detention area with their hands raised." 24 minutes, Lieutenant. Not 6 hours. The knot in Sarah's stomach tightened. She had hoped this day would never come. The truth about Proxima Station was something she had buried deep, not out of shame but out of necessity. The galaxy wasn't ready for that truth. Perhaps the drone's timestamp was affected by the damage, Sarah suggested, knowing it was a weak explanation. Commander Vex's crystalline form shifted slightly, indicating increased processing activity. "We considered that possibility. However, we cross-referenced the drone's data with the station's main computer, the pirates' own logs, and testimonies from 17 witnesses. All sources confirm the compressed timeline." Admiral Corinth leaned back in his chair, his 4 arms folded in a gesture of deep concern. "Lieutenant Chen, you are one of the most respected soldiers in the Galactic Fleet. Your actions at Proxima Station have been studied in military academies across 47 worlds. If there are details that were omitted from the official reports, now is the time to clarify them. Sarah looked at the two officers, both representatives of species that had evolved beyond physical violence millions of years ago. They lived in a galaxy where conflicts were resolved through patience, understanding, and careful negotiation. The idea that a problem could be solved in 24 minutes rather than 6 hours probably seemed impossible to them. But Sarah knew the truth. She knew what had really happened in that command center, and she knew why the pirates had surrendered so quickly. The question was whether the galaxy was ready to learn what humans were really capable of when pushed to their limits. "Sir," Sarah said carefully, "I need you to understand that my actions were necessary to save those 2,000 lives. Everything I did was to protect innocent people." "We're not questioning your motives, Lieutenant," Admiral Corinth said gently. "We're trying to understand your methods. The galaxy has celebrated you as a symbol of human diplomatic evolution. If that perception needs to be adjusted, we need to know." Sarah took a deep breath. She thought about the families on Proxima Station, the children in the residential areas, the miners who had never held a weapon in their lives. She thought about the pirate leader's eyes when he finally understood what he was really facing. "The truth is more complicated than the reports suggest," she said finally. "And once I tell you what really happened, there's no going back. The galaxy's view of humanity will change forever." Commander Vex and Admiral Corinth exchanged glances. Neither of them could have imagined how right she was. The silence in Admiral Corinth's office stretched for nearly a minute. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across his alien features. His species, the Zeltharians, had eliminated warfare from their society 12,000 years ago through a combination of genetic modification and cultural evolution. The concept of deception in official reports was foreign to him. Commander Vex was the first to speak. "We require complete transparency, Lieutenant Chen. The Galactic Defense Council operates on principles of absolute honesty between member species. If the reports were simplified, for political reasons, we need to understand the full truth." Sarah nodded, understanding the position they were in. The integration of humanity into galactic society had been delicate. Most species viewed humans as barely controlled barbarians, having only recently emerged from centuries of global warfare. Her supposed diplomatic triumph at Proxima Station had been crucial in changing those perceptions. "Before I explain what happened," Sarah said, "I need you to understand the tactical situation we faced. The pirates weren't ordinary criminals. They were Zeltharian military deserters who had stolen advanced weaponry from your own arsenal." Admiral Corinth's silver skin shifted to a darker shade, indicating distress. "That information was classified at the highest levels. How did you—" "Because they told me, sir. When I entered their command center, they were very proud of their stolen technology. They had plasma cannons capable of cracking the station's hull, neural disruptors that could incapacitate hundreds of people at once, and worst of all, they had a quantum bomb. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Quantum bombs were theoretical weapons that most species refused to develop, due to their horrific nature. They didn't just destroy matter, they unraveled the quantum fabric of space itself, creating areas where the basic laws of physics ceased to function." Commander Vex's crystalline form began to pulse with agitated light. "A quantum bomb? That's impossible. Even if they had stolen one, no rational being would threaten to use it. The fallout could affect entire solar systems." "Exactly," Sarah said grimly, "which is why the situation was far more desperate than anyone realized. These weren't rational actors. They were Zeltharian military officers who had been subjected to experimental combat stimulants. The drugs had made them incredibly aggressive and completely unpredictable." She paused, letting that information sink in. Both officers looked uncomfortable. The Zeltharian military's secret experiments with human-inspired aggression enhancers was another classified matter that few people knew about. The official negotiation story was created because the truth would have caused a panic, Sarah continued. "Imagine the headlines: Zeltharian military loses quantum weapon to drug-addled deserters. The political ramifications would have been catastrophic." Admiral Corinth slumped in his chair, his forearms hanging limply. "So what really happened in those 24 minutes? Sarah's expression hardened slightly, and for just a moment, both officers caught a glimpse of something that made them deeply uncomfortable. It was a look they had never seen on any sentient being's face. Cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. "I did what humans do best when faced with impossible situations," she said simply. "I improvised." The holographic display flickered and changed, showing the interior of the pirates' command center. It was a cramped space filled with stolen military equipment and 7 heavily armed Zeltharian deserters. The image quality was poor, but both officers could see Sarah entering the room with her hands apparently empty. "The lead pirate was named Orcs," Sarah continued. "Former Special Operations, 3 tours of duty in the Frontier Wars. He'd been exposed to concentrated aggression stimulants for 6 months. By the time I met him, he was barely recognizable as a Zeltharian." She gestured to the hologram, where a figure that was once proud and silver now appeared manic and twitchy. "He started by showing me their weapons, bragging about how they were going to become the most feared pirates in the galaxy. Then he showed me the quantum bomb." Commander Vex leaned forward, his mathematical mind struggling to process the tactical implications. "How are you supposed to negotiate with someone in that mental state? Our psychology experts said it would take hours of careful manipulation to build enough trust for a peaceful resolution." "Your psychology experts were thinking like Zeltharians," Sarah replied. "They assumed that everyone responds to logic and patience eventually. But humans learned a long time ago that some situations can't be solved with words." The hologram shifted to show Sarah moving closer to the pirate leader. To the untrained eye, it looked like a casual conversation, but both officers noticed something strange about her body language. Every movement was precise, calculated like a predator stalking prey. "I realized within the first 30 seconds that negotiation was impossible," Sarah said. "Korax wasn't just unstable. He was actively planning to detonate the quantum bomb regardless of whether his demands were met. The stimulants had convinced him that dying in a blaze of destruction was preferable to surrender." Admiral Corinth's voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" "I evaluated my options. 7 hostiles, all armed with military-grade weapons. 2,000 innocent lives at stake. A quantum bomb that could destabilize the entire sector if detonated. Traditional negotiation was ineffective. Calling for backup would take 40 minutes minimum. Too long." She paused and her expression became almost apologetic. "So I did what my species has been doing for millennia when faced with impossible odds. I cheated." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Neither alien officer fully understood what she meant, but they both felt a primitive fear creeping up their spines. "While appearing to negotiate, I was actually conducting a detailed tactical assessment." Korax was standing 3 meters from the quantum bomb's activation console. 2 pirates were covering the exits. 3 more were monitoring station communications. The last one was watching me. Sarah's voice took on a clinical tone that made both officers deeply uncomfortable. "Human combat doctrine emphasizes speed, deception, and overwhelming violence when stealth approaches are necessary." The entire engagement lasted 14 seconds. Commander Vex's crystalline form had stopped pulsing entirely. 14 seconds. But the footage shows you talking to them for over 20 minutes. "Yes," Sarah said simply, "because after I neutralized the immediate threat, I had to stage the surrender to match the official story. I spent the remaining time positioning the unconscious pirates, adjusting their weapons to look like they had been peacefully surrendered, and coaching the conscious survivors on what to say to investigators." The room fell silent again. Both officers stared at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. The gentle, diplomatic hero they thought they knew had just admitted to something that challenged everything they understood about conflict resolution. "You're saying you defeated 7 armed military professionals in 14 seconds, Admiral Corinth asked incredulously. "I'm saying I prevented 2,000 innocent deaths and the potential destabilization of local spacetime," Sarah corrected. The method was less important than the result. But as she looked at their shocked faces, Sarah realized that for her alien colleagues the method was everything. Admiral Corinth stood up abruptly, his forearms trembling slightly. "Lieutenant Chen, I need you to explain exactly what happened in those 14 seconds. The Council needs to understand the full scope of human combat capabilities." Sarah hesitated. She had spent 3 years carefully building humanity's reputation as a species, evolving beyond violence. What she was about to reveal would shatter that image forever. "Sir, with respect, I don't think you understand what you're asking. My species spent over 50,000 years perfecting the art of warfare. What I did on Proxima Station was nothing exceptional by human standards. It was basic infantry training. Commander Vex's crystalline form flickered with rapid calculations. Basic training? You defeated 7 armed opponents in 14 seconds. That's mathematically impossible unless you used weapons of mass destruction. I used improvised tools and anatomical knowledge, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Every human soldier learns to identify weak points in alien anatomy during basic training. Your species might have evolved beyond violence, but your bodies still have the same vulnerabilities they did millions of years ago. The holographic display zoomed in on the moment Sarah entered the pirate's command center. She appeared relaxed, even friendly, as she approached Corax. But now that they knew what to look for, both officers could see the subtle changes in her posture, the way her eyes tracked every movement, every weapon, every potential threat. The first priority was the quantum bomb, Sarah continued. Corax was within arm's reach of the activation controls. I had to neutralize him before he could react to any aggressive move on my part. In the hologram, they watched Sarah step closer to Corax, apparently fascinated by his explanation of the stolen weapons. Her right hand gestured casually as she spoke, but her left hand remained perfectly still at her side. Zeltharian nervous systems have a specific vulnerability, Sarah explained, her voice taking on an instructional tone. Your main neural clusters are located at the base of your necks, protected only by a thin membrane. A precisely applied pressure of 23 pounds per square inch will cause immediate unconsciousness without permanent damage. Admiral Corinth unconsciously touched his neck, suddenly very aware of his own anatomy. The hologram showed Sarah's casual gesture becoming a lightning-fast strike. Her left hand moved in a blur, catching Corax at the base of his skull. The pirate leader collapsed instantly, his finger falling away from the quantum bomb controls just as he was about to activate them. Target neutralized in 0.7 seconds, Sarah said clinically. The remaining pirates required 13.3 seconds. What happened next was unlike anything either officer had ever witnessed. Sarah moved through the command center like liquid death, each movement precise and economical. The second pirate, who had been watching the entrance, turned at the sound of Corax falling. Sarah's boot caught him in what humans called the solar plexus, a nerve cluster that existed in most humanoid species. He doubled over, unable to breathe, and Sarah's elbow strike to the back of his head ensured he wouldn't recover quickly. Zeltharian respiratory systems can be temporarily disabled with minimal force, she explained as they watched. It causes no permanent damage but ensures compliance. The third pirate raised his weapon, but Sarah was already moving. She grabbed a maintenance tool from a nearby console, a simple wrench, and threw it with devastating accuracy. It struck the pirate's wrist, causing him to drop his weapon, and Sarah was on him before he could react. Commander Vex made a sound like crystalline wind chimes in a hurricane. The mathematical precision required for that throw. You calculated trajectory, force, and timing while under extreme stress. Every human can do that, Sarah said simply. We call it hand-eye coordination. Our ancestors developed it over millions of years of hunting prey and avoiding predators. The remaining pirates tried to coordinate their response, but they were thinking like civilized beings. They expected Sarah to take cover, to call for help, to try to escape. Instead, she moved toward them, using their own equipment as improvised weapons and their surprise as an advantage. A communication device became a projectile that shattered a pirate's weapon scope. A chair became a shield and then a battering ram. Even the pirates' superior technology couldn't compensate for their complete lack of experience with human combat doctrine. You see, Sarah continued as they watched her systematically disable the remaining threats. Your species assumed that intelligence and violence are mutually exclusive. You believed that a truly advanced civilization would evolve beyond the need for physical conflict. She paused the hologram at the moment when all 7 pirates lay unconscious around her, the entire engagement over in less than 15 seconds. But humans learned something different. We discovered that the capacity for controlled violence, when properly applied, can prevent much greater violence. One person willing to act decisively can save thousands of lives. Admiral Corinth was staring at the paused image with an expression of deep discomfort. Lieutenant, what you're describing isn't just combat skill. It's predatory behavior. You analyzed, hunted, and neutralized 7 sentient beings as if they were prey animals. Sarah nodded, understanding his distress. From your perspective, yes. But from a human perspective, I showed remarkable restraint. I could have killed all 7 pirates in half the time. but I chose to incapacitate them instead. Every strike was calculated to disable rather than destroy. Commander Vex's form was pulsing with rapid analysis patterns. This suggests that human combat capabilities are far beyond what we estimated. If this represents basic training, as you claim, what would advanced human military tactics look like? The question hung in the air like a weapon itself. Sarah realized that her casual mention of basic training had inadvertently revealed something that humanity had been carefully hiding. The galactic community had accepted humans based on the assumption that they were a young, aggressive species that could be gradually civilized. The truth was far more complex and far more terrifying. Sir, Sarah said carefully, I think it's important to understand that human military doctrine has evolved over millennia of facing existential threats. We didn't choose to become effective at violence, we had to become effective to survive. Admiral Corinth sat back down heavily. But the implications, if every human soldier possesses these capabilities, if this is truly basic training, he trailed off, unable to voice what they were all thinking. If this is basic, Commander Vex finished, what do your special forces look like? Sarah's expression remained neutral, but both officers caught something in her eyes, a flicker of amusement, perhaps or pity. With respect, sirs, she said quietly, you're not ready for that conversation yet. The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the station's systems. In the span of 24 minutes 3 years ago and in the span of this conversation today, everything had changed. The galaxy's understanding of humanity would never be the same. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened 12 hours after Sarah's revelation. Representatives from 47 worlds gathered in the great amphitheater of Central Station, their various forms creating a kaleidoscope of evolutionary diversity. Admiral Corinth and Commander Vex sat at the primary testimony table, both looking as though they hadn't slept since their meeting with Lieutenant Chen. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing her dress uniform, still maintaining the composed demeanor that had made her famous. But now the assembled representatives looked at her differently. Where once they had seen a symbol of human diplomatic evolution, they now saw something that challenged their fundamental understanding of civilized behavior. High Counselor Thren, an ancient being from the ethereal collective whose species had transcended physical form millions of years ago, spoke first. His voice resonated through the chamber without sound, communicating directly with the minds of all present. Lieutenant Chen, the evidence you have provided raises disturbing questions about humanity's integration into galactic society. For 3 years, you have been presented as proof that humans could evolve beyond their violent nature. Now we discover that the very incident that established this reputation involved what you term basic combat skills. Sarah nodded respectfully. Yes, Your Honor, I understand the Council's concerns. Do you? The question came from Ambassador Kyrex of the Silicon Confederacy, whose mechanical form towered over most other representatives. Because from our analysis, what you describe as basic human military training exceeds the combat capabilities of most of our advanced security forces. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many species had evolved beyond physical conflict so long ago that they had eliminated not just warfare, but all forms of physical confrontation. The idea that humans could disable multiple armed opponents in seconds was not just impressive, it was fundamentally alien to their understanding of civilized behavior. Dr. Wellness, the Axiom Collective's chief xenopsychologist, projected his analysis into the chamber's shared consciousness. We have conducted preliminary studies based on Lieutenant Chen's testimony. If her capabilities represent standard human training, then humanity's military potential has been drastically underestimated. The holographic display above the chamber showed a comparative analysis. Human combat effectiveness was charted against various galactic species, and the results were startling. Even accounting for technological advantages, humans consistently outperformed opponents through tactical flexibility, rapid decision-making, and what the report termed adaptive aggression. The mathematics are clear, Dr. Wellness continued. Humans possess a unique combination of intelligence, physical capability, and psychological conditioning that makes them exceptionally effective at violence. This isn't a criticism, it's simply an observation of evolutionary fact. Sarah watched the faces, or their equivalent, of the assembled representatives. She could see fear beginning to replace curiosity. The galaxy had accepted humanity as junior partners, dangerous perhaps, but manageable. Now they were confronting the possibility that they had welcomed apex predators into their peaceful community. "If I may address the Council's concerns," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. High Counselor Thren granted permission with a thought, and Sarah continued. "I understand that human combat capabilities appear threatening from your perspectives, but I would like the Council to consider the context in which these abilities developed. Humanity didn't choose to become effective warriors. We were forced to by our evolutionary environment." The chamber's display shifted to show Earth's history. Mass extinctions, climate catastrophes, and millions of years of species competing for limited resources. Unlike most of the worlds represented in the Council, Earth had been a harsh teacher that rewarded adaptability and punished weakness. Every human child learns to recognize threats, assess risks, and respond decisively because for most of our species' existence, hesitation meant death. We didn't evolve these capabilities to conquer others. We evolved them to survive impossible odds. Ambassador Kyrex's mechanical voice carried skepticism. Yet the result is the same. You possess abilities that could destabilize galactic peace if applied aggressively. With respect, Ambassador, that assumes we want to destabilize galactic peace, Sarah replied. The incident at Proxima Station demonstrates the opposite. I could have eliminated the pirate threat in seconds using lethal force. Instead, I chose methods that preserved life while achieving the mission objective. Commander Vex stepped forward from the testimony table. The lieutenant makes a valid point. Her actions, while more violent than initially reported, showed considerable restraint by human standards. That's precisely what concerns us, interjected Dr. Phelan from the Pacifist Alliance. You speak of restraint and non-lethal methods as if the alternative is casual murder. How are we supposed to coexist with a species that considers killing multiple opponents in seconds to be a reasonable response to conflict? The chamber erupted in competing voices, thoughts, and electromagnetic communications as representatives struggled to process the implications. Some called for immediate restrictions on human military personnel. Others suggested psychological evaluation and modification programs. A few even proposed quarantine protocols to contain what they saw as a dangerous species. Through it all, Sarah remained calm, waiting for the commotion to die down. When silence finally returned, she spoke with quiet authority. Honored representatives, I would like to share something that might provide perspective on human nature. The chamber's attention focused on her completely. 3 weeks before the Proxima Station incident, I received a commendation for spending 6 hours talking a suicidal Zeltharian civilian down from a plasma relay tower. No weapons were involved, no violence occurred, just patient conversation and emotional support. That action received no media coverage, no medals, no recognition. She paused, letting that sink in. The same training that taught me to disable 7 armed pirates in 14 seconds also taught me to value every sentient life. Human military doctrine doesn't just focus on eliminating threats. It emphasizes protecting the innocent, minimizing casualties, and finding solutions that preserve life whenever possible. High Counselor Thren's mental voice carried a note of confusion. You claim to be trained killers who refuse to kill? We're trained survivors who choose to protect, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Every human understands that violence is sometimes necessary, but we also understand that it should always be the last resort. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this paradox. A species evolved for violence that chose restraint was perhaps more dangerous than one that simply chose violence, because it suggested a level of discipline and strategic thinking that most peaceful species had never needed to develop. Ambassador Kyrex was the first to voice what many were thinking. If this is true, if humans possess both the capability for devastating violence and the wisdom to restrain it, then perhaps the question isn't whether we can trust humanity. Perhaps the question is whether we deserve their protection. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. For the first time in galactic history, a species might be powerful enough to dominate others but choosing not to. It was a concept that challenged everything the peaceful civilizations thought they knew about power, evolution, and the nature of advanced society. Sarah smiled slightly, recognizing the moment when everything changed. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their capacity for violence, It was their capacity for restraint in spite of that violence. But first, they would have to learn to see the difference. 2 months after the council session, the galaxy was still reeling from what historians would later call the Chen Revelation. News of humanity's true combat capabilities had spread through diplomatic channels, causing reactions that ranged from fascination to terror across the civilized worlds. Sarah sat in her new office aboard the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442b, reviewing reports from across human space. Her promotion to cultural liaison specialist had been swift and somewhat overwhelming. Suddenly, everyone wanted to understand humanity better, though their motivations varied dramatically. A soft chime announced her first appointment of the day. Dr. Telesh, a renowned xenoanthropologist from the Wisdom Collective, entered with her characteristic floating grace. Her species had evolved beyond physical bodies centuries ago, existing as pure consciousness within sophisticated energy matrices. Specialist Chen, Dr. Telesh said, her voice manifesting as harmonious tones in the air. Thank you for agreeing to this interview. Please, just Sarah, she replied, gesturing to the specially designed seating area that accommodated various alien physiologies. I understand you're researching the relationship between evolutionary pressure and moral development? Dr. Telesh's energy form shifted colors, indicating excitement. Indeed. Your species presents a fascinating paradox that challenges conventional wisdom about civilization advancement. Most sentient species develop complex moral systems as they move away from survival-based thinking. Humans appear to have developed them because of survival pressures. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. That's an interesting way to put it. I've never thought about human morality as being rooted in survival, but I suppose it makes sense. We learned early that cooperation and protection of the group was essential for species survival. Exactly. Dr. Telesh's form pulsed brighter. Take the concept of courage in human culture. Most species understand it as an absence of fear, but humans define it as acting despite fear. This suggests your moral framework actually incorporates danger as a natural element of existence. Before Sarah could respond, her door chimed again. This time, 3 beings entered simultaneously. Ambassador Kyrex from the Silicon Confederacy, Commander Zephys from the Oceanic Federation, and surprisingly, Admiral Corinth. I apologize for the interruption, Admiral Corinth said, his forearms showing the formal posture of urgent business. We've received reports that require immediate human consultation. Sarah stood, immediately shifting into professional mode. What's the situation? Commander Zephys, whose aquatic species rarely left their water-filled habitats, spoke through his translation apparatus. The Void Strider pirate fleet has taken control of the Nexus trade route. They're holding 17 cargo vessels and approximately 3,000 civilians hostage. The Void Striders? Sarah frowned. I thought they were just a minor nuisance operation. They were, Ambassador Kyrex interjected, his mechanical voice carrying unusual urgency, until they acquired military-grade weaponry from unknown sources. Our intelligence suggests they now possess firepower equivalent to a small fleet. Dr. Talish's energy form dimmed with concern. The Galactic Security Forces have been attempting negotiation for 72 hours with no progress. The pirates have made it clear they will begin executing hostages if their demands aren't met within 6 hours. Sarah felt the familiar knot in her stomach that came with impossible situations. What are their demands? Complete control of the Nexus route, official recognition as a sovereign entity, and a tribute system from all passing vessels, Admiral Corinth replied grimly. Essentially, they want to become a legitimate government through hostage-taking and threats. And the security forces can't handle it? Commander Zephys made a sound like water flowing over rocks, his species equivalent of a sigh. The hostage vessels are scattered across a debris field that makes direct assault impossible without massive civilian casualties. The pirates have positioned themselves perfectly to maximize their defensive advantage. Sarah studied the tactical display they had brought with them. The situation was indeed complex. 17 vessels trapped in a maze of asteroid debris, with the pirates controlling key choke points and using the hostages as human shields. Traditional fleet tactics would be useless, and any attempt at forced entry would result in hundreds of deaths. Why are you bringing this to me? Sarah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Because, Dr. Telesh said softly, After your revelation about human combat doctrine, several council members suggested that humanity might have alternative approaches to this type of problem. Sarah looked at each of them in turn. You want me to solve this the way I solved Proxima Station? We want you to save 3,000 lives, Admiral Corinth said firmly. Whatever methods you deem necessary. It was a pivotal moment. The galaxy was essentially asking humanity to embrace the role they had been trying to avoid. The warrior protectors, the ones who solved problems that couldn't be solved with patience and negotiation. I'll need a small team of human specialists, Sarah said finally, and I'll need complete operational authority. Done, Commander Zephys replied immediately. What kind of specialists? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful as she began to shift into tactical planning mode. Combat engineers, infiltration experts, and psychological warfare specialists. We'll need to approach this as a precision operation rather than a traditional assault. Psychological warfare? Dr. Telesh asked, her energy form flickering with curiosity. Most pirate organizations rely on reputation and fear to maintain control, Sarah explained. The Void Striders have positioned themselves as untouchable, controlling the situation through superior firepower and tactical positioning. But every criminal organization has psychological weak points. Ambassador Kyrex leaned forward with mechanical precision. You're planning to break their morale rather than their defenses. I'm planning to make them realize they're not predators in this situation, Sarah corrected. They're prey, and once they understand that, they'll make different choices. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Telesh was the first to speak. You're going to hunt them. Sarah's smile was gentle but carried an edge that made all the aliens present slightly uncomfortable. I'm going to save the hostages. How the pirates choose to respond to that is entirely up to them. Admiral Corinth's skin shifted to a darker silver, indicating deep anxiety. Sarah, if you do this, if you demonstrate advanced human military tactics on a galactic stage, there's no going back. Everyone will know what humanity is capable of. They already know we're capable of violence, Sarah replied. Now they're going to learn that we're capable of precision. As the meeting broke up and the various officials left to make preparations, Dr. Talish lingered behind. Sarah, she said thoughtfully, I believe I'm beginning to understand human morality. You don't see violence and protection as opposites, do you? You see them as different applications of the same capability. Sarah considered this for a moment. Maybe. We learned a long time ago that sometimes the only way to protect innocence is to be willing to destroy those who threaten it. The galaxy sees that as a contradiction. We see it as a responsibility. Dr. Talish's energy form pulsed with what might have been understanding, and that, perhaps, is why you're the only species that could have evolved both the ability and the restraint to handle situations like this. As the xenoanthropologist departed, Sarah began composing her request for personnel. The galaxy was about to witness human military doctrine in action, not as conquest or domination, but as protection taken to its logical extreme. The pirates had 3,000 hostages. They thought that made them powerful. They were about to learn the difference between power and precision. The observation deck of the Galactic Security Command ship buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from a dozen species watched the tactical displays. The Void Strider pirates had been holding their hostages for 4 days now, their demands growing more extreme with each passing hour. Traditional approaches had failed completely. Sarah stood at the central command console, coordinating with her hand-picked team of human specialists who were already in position throughout the debris field. To the watching aliens, her calm demeanor seemed almost unnatural given the stakes involved. Specialist Chen, Admiral Corinth said, his voice tight with anxiety. The pirates have just issued an ultimatum. They're threatening to execute 50 hostages in 1 hour if the security forces don't withdraw completely. Sarah didn't look up from her displays. Acknowledged. Team Alpha, report status. Position confirmed, came the reply from Sergeant Martinez, a combat engineer currently attached to the hull of a disabled freighter, 2 kilometers from the pirates' main stronghold. Charges are placed and ready for remote detonation. Team Bravo. Infiltration complete, reported Lieutenant Kim, whose psychological warfare specialty had proven invaluable in the past 24 hours. I've been broadcasting our prepared transmissions on their private channels. Their communications chatter indicates increasing paranoia and internal discord. Commander Vex observed the human coordination with fascination.
Specialist Chen, your teams have been in position for 18 hours.
Why haven't you initiated action yet? Sarah finally looked up, and the watching aliens saw something in her expression that made them deeply uncomfortable. It wasn't bloodlust or aggression, it was the patient calculation of a predator that had already won but was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Because the operation isn't about defeating the pirates, she explained. It's about saving the hostages with 0 casualties. That requires perfect timing, complete coordination, and psychological preparation of both the targets and the victims. Dr. Talesh, who had remained to observe human tactics in action, pulsed with nervous energy. Psychological preparation of the victims? Most of the hostages have been captive for 4 days. They're traumatized, scared, and likely to panic at any sudden change. Before we can rescue them, we need them ready to follow instructions instantly and without question. The main display showed the 17 captured vessels scattered throughout a dense asteroid field. The pirates had chosen their position well. Any conventional assault would require navigating narrow passages where ships could be easily ambushed or destroyed. But Sarah's team hadn't approached conventionally. Team Charlie, initiate Phase 1, Sarah commanded. Suddenly, the pirates' communication networks erupted with false emergency signals. Reports of incoming security forces, asteroid impacts, and system failures flooded their channels simultaneously. It was carefully orchestrated chaos designed to overwhelm their decision-making processes. Phase 1 is information warfare, Sarah explained to her audience. We're feeding them more crisis data than they can process, forcing them to make reactive decisions instead of strategic ones. On the displays, they could see the pirate vessels beginning to reposition themselves, responding to threats that existed only in their communication systems. The beautiful precision of their defensive formation started to crumble as individual captains made independent decisions based on conflicting information. Phase 2, Sarah announced. This time, the effect was visible. Small explosions bloomed silently throughout the asteroid field, not on the captured vessels but on the asteroids themselves. Sergeant Martinez's charges were reshaping the battlefield, creating new passages and eliminating others. You're changing the terrain, Ambassador Kyrex observed with mechanical precision, forcing them into predictable movement patterns. Exactly. Pirates rely on superior positioning to maintain advantage. Take away their position, and they become just another group of confused criminals. The watching aliens saw the pirate formation dissolving in real time. Ships that had been perfectly positioned to control the field were suddenly exposed as new sightlines opened, and old defensive positions became vulnerable. Team Delta, you have green light. The final phase began with what appeared to be nothing at all. For several minutes, the displays showed no obvious change. Then one by one, pirate vessels began going dark. How are you doing that? Commander Zephys asked, his aquatic form rippling with amazement. Infiltration specialists, Sarah replied simply. While the pirates were distracted by false emergencies and changing terrain, my people approached their ships using personal stealth technology. They're currently disabling weapons, engines, and life support systems from within. It was surgical precision on a scale that none of the watching species had ever witnessed. Each pirate vessel was being systematically neutralized by human operators who had somehow managed to board them undetected during the chaos of the previous phases. The key to human military doctrine, Sarah continued as they watched the pirate fleet become helpless, is that we don't fight fair. We fight smart. Every advantage we can gain through preparation, deception, or superior tactics reduces the need for actual violence. Dr. Talesh's energy form was pulsing rapidly with excitement and concern. This level of coordination. How many humans does it take to achieve this kind of operational precision? Sarah smiled slightly. 12. The silence that followed was profound. 12 humans had dismantled a pirate operation that had stymied the entire galactic security forces. Not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through tactical thinking that treated the entire situation as a three-dimensional puzzle to be solved, rather than an enemy to be destroyed. All teams, initiate rescue protocols, Sarah commanded. Now the true precision of the operation became clear. As the pirate ships lost power and communications, the human specialists began moving through the captured vessels, identifying and securing hostages with methodical efficiency. Each team knew exactly where to go, which hostages to evacuate first, and how to manage the psychological trauma of sudden rescue. Within 30 minutes, all 3,000 hostages were aboard security force vessels. Medical teams were treating the injured, and the pirates found themselves stranded in disabled ships with no weapons, no engines, and no options except surrender. Not a single shot had been fired. Not one hostage had been harmed during the rescue. The Void Striders, who had terrorized the trade routes for months, were reduced to helpless criminals awaiting pickup by prison transports. Admiral Corinth stared at the tactical displays in stunned silence. 12 humans just accomplished what our entire fleet couldn't manage. Because you were thinking about it as a military problem, Sarah explained. Humans learned to think of it as a hunting problem. The pirates weren't enemies. They were prey that happened to have hostages. Once you understand that distinction, the tactics become obvious. Commander Vex's crystalline form was processing rapidly. The implications of this operation will resonate throughout the galaxy. Every species will need to recalibrate their understanding of human capabilities. Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of what had just occurred. We didn't want this level of attention. We were hoping to integrate quietly, prove we could be peaceful members of galactic society. But sometimes, Dr. Telesh observed, the greatest act of peace is a perfectly executed act of war. As the last of the hostages were confirmed safe and the pirates were taken into custody, Sarah realized that humanity's role in the galaxy had fundamentally changed. They were no longer the junior partners hoping to prove their worth. They were the specialists called in when conventional approaches failed. The galaxy was about to learn that having humans as allies meant never having to consider a situation truly hopeless, but it also meant confronting the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the difference between civilization and chaos was a small group of humans willing to do what others couldn't or wouldn't do themselves. 1 year after the Void Strider incident, Sarah stood before the assembled Galactic Defense Council once again. But this time the atmosphere was entirely different. Where once there had been curiosity and mild concern about humanity's violent nature, now there was something approaching reverence mixed with healthy respect. The great amphitheater had been modified to accommodate new seating arrangements. Human representatives now occupied positions typically reserved for senior species, and several worlds had requested permanent human military advisors, a concept that would have been unthinkable just months before. High Counselor Thran addressed the assembly with his characteristic mental voice, but now it carried notes of gratitude rather than suspicion. The past year has been illuminating. The Void Strider rescue was merely the beginning of humanity's contributions to galactic security. Sarah glanced at the statistical display hovering above the chamber. The numbers told an impressive story. 14 major pirate operations dismantled, 3 territorial disputes resolved through human-assisted negotiation, and most significantly, 0 casualties during any operation involving human tactical specialists. The Chen Doctrine, as military academies had begun calling it, was being studied across 47 worlds. The concept that violence and protection could be 2 aspects of the same capability was revolutionizing how peaceful species approached security challenges. Ambassador Kyrex, who had become something of a human military enthusiast, projected his mechanical voice across the chamber. The Silicon Confederacy wishes to formally acknowledge that our understanding of civilization advancement was incomplete. We assumed that moving beyond violence was the natural progression of intelligent species. Humanity has taught us that sometimes the highest form of civilization is knowing when violence is necessary and having the courage to apply it precisely. Commander Vex stood to address the assembly, his crystalline form now pulsing with patterns that indicated deep respect. Mathematical analysis of human operations continues to yield fascinating results. Their success rate in complex tactical situations exceeds 97%, with casualty rates among protected populations remaining at 0. But perhaps most importantly, Dr. Telesh interjected, her energy form glowing brighter. Humans have demonstrated something we thought was impossible, the ability to be simultaneously the most dangerous and most protective species in known space. Sarah listened to the testimonials with mixed feelings. Humanity had indeed found its place in galactic society, but it wasn't the place they had originally wanted. They had hoped to be accepted as peaceful neighbors, contributing through trade, culture, and scientific advancement. Instead, they had become the galaxy's ultimate problem solvers, the species called in when gentle diplomacy and patient negotiation failed. "If I may address the Council," Sarah said, rising from her seat. The chamber fell silent with an attentiveness that still made her slightly uncomfortable. A year ago, she had been a curiosity. Now, when humans spoke about security matters, the entire galaxy listened. "I want to thank the Council for the trust you've shown in humanity over the past year, but I also want to address some concerns that have been raised by various species about our role in galactic affairs." She activated her personal display, showing a map of human space and the surrounding regions. "Some worlds have expressed worry that humanity is becoming too militaristic, that our success in security operations might lead to expansionist ambitions. I want to address those fears directly." The display zoomed in on several key systems. In the past year, humanity has been invited to establish security bases in 12 systems. We have declined 11 of those invitations. We accepted only the Kepler outpost, and only because it serves as a coordination center for emergency response operations. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the assembly. Most species that gained military prominence quickly leveraged it into territorial expansion. Additionally, Sarah continued, every human military operation conducted in galactic space has been at the direct request of the affected governments. We have never initiated action without formal invitation and council approval. Dr. Talesh's form brightened with understanding. You're demonstrating that human military capability comes with built-in ethical restraints. Your species genuinely doesn't want to conquer or control, you simply want to protect. That's correct, Sarah confirmed. Humans learned millennia ago that the strongest civilizations aren't those that expand through conquest, but those that grow through cooperation and mutual aid. We offer our capabilities not to dominate, but to ensure that peaceful species can continue to develop without fear. Admiral Corinth, who had become one of humanity's strongest advocates, stood to address the chamber. The Council should also be aware of humanity's most recent proposal. They have suggested the creation of a galactic emergency response corps, a joint organization that would combine human tactical expertise with alien technologies and resources. The proposal had been controversial when first presented. It essentially meant acknowledging that the galaxy needed a permanent military organization, something that challenged the fundamental assumptions of most peaceful civilizations. The beauty of the human approach, continued Admiral Corinth, is that they're not asking to lead this organization. They're volunteering to serve in it under galactic oversight, as specialists who can be called upon when conventional approaches prove inadequate. High Counselor Thren's mental voice carried a note of amazement. In effect, humanity is offering to be the galaxy's immune system, present when needed, dormant otherwise, and always acting in service of the greater whole, rather than their own interests. Sarah nodded. That's an excellent analogy, Your Honor. Just as a biological immune system protects the body by eliminating threats while leaving healthy tissue unharmed, humanity can serve as a protective force that activates only when the peace and stability of galactic civilization is threatened. The debate that followed was spirited but remarkably positive. Species that had once viewed humans with suspicion now competed to offer resources and support for the proposed emergency response. Corps, the Wisdom Collective, offered advanced sensors and communication systems. The Silicon Confederacy provided manufacturing capabilities. Even the traditionally isolationist ethereal collectives agreed to share defensive technologies. As the session concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by alien diplomats expressing gratitude and offering partnership agreements. It was overwhelming but also deeply satisfying. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or supplicants, but as guardians. Later, as she walked through the station's observation lounge, Sarah was joined by Dr. Talesh, whose energy form floated companionably beside her. You've achieved something remarkable, the xenoanthropologist said. Humanity has managed to be accepted not despite your capacity for violence, but because of how you choose to apply it. Sarah gazed out at the stars, thinking about the long journey that had brought them to this point. My species spent 50,000 years learning to fight. I'm glad we can finally use those skills to protect instead of conquer. And the galaxy is safer for it, Dr. Talesh replied. though I suspect future historians will mark this period as the moment when true galactic civilization became possible. Why? Because for the first time in recorded history, the peaceful species don't have to choose between vulnerability and violence. You've given us a third option: protection through partnership with those who understand both the necessity and the restraint of force. As Sarah watched the stars, she reflected on how far humanity had come. They had entered galactic society as barely civilized warriors trying to prove they could be peaceful. They had found their true role as civilized warriors who chose to be protectors. The evidence that had initially threatened to tear down Sarah's heroic image had instead revealed something far more important: that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their capacity for violence, but their wisdom in how they chose to use it. In a galaxy full of peaceful species who had forgotten how to fight, humans had become the guardians who remembered and who could be trusted to fight only for the right reasons. The heroic image of the good girl soldier hadn't been destroyed after all. It had simply evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before: warriors who fought not for glory or conquest, but for the preservation of peace itself. And in doing so, humanity had finally found their place among the stars.